3:22 a.m., a gas station. Tony Rodriguez was counting the day's sales at the register. Three armed men entered through the door, coming for a $200 cash drawer. What they didn't know was that Tony had previously been a SWAT team leader and had faced this exact situation 127 times before. But this story doesn't begin that night. This story begins 15 years earlier, on the darkest day of Tony's life. The tragic event that transformed him from the city's most dangerous police unit into an ordinary gas station attendant. Welcome to Hidden Stories. Before we begin this powerful tale of transformation, hidden identity, and unexpected heroism, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you believe true heroes never truly retire, support us so these stories are never forgotten. In Tony Rodriguez's basement, hidden inside a dusty box, were things he hadn't touched in exactly 5 years, 7 months, and 12 days. What was in that box? A SWAT uniform, but not just any uniform. This uniform had witnessed the most successful operations in Denver Metro SWAT team history. It bore invisible bloodstains. Not Tony's, but those of the hostages he'd saved. The badge symbolized 15 years of perfect service record. And in the pocket, a photograph he'd never told anyone about. An 8-person SWAT team, all smiling. But one of those 8 people in the photo was no longer alive. And that's why Tony never wore that uniform again. For 15 years, every morning Tony would pass by that box, but never open it. He hadn't even told his wife Maria exactly what was inside. He'd just say, "Memories from the old job." But Tony knew. In that box wasn't just a uniform. There was an identity he'd left behind, a life he'd abandoned, and a mistake he'd never forgiven himself for. Until that night. Until 3:22 a.m., when he'd be forced to bring the real Tony Rodriguez back out. 2008 Denver. Tony Rodriguez was only 31 years old when he was appointed SWAT team leader. The youngest team leader, highest success rate, 100% operation success, 0 team casualties, 0 civilian casualties. Tony was perfect, cool-headed, analytical, quick decision maker. His team trusted him blindly because Tony had never made a mistake until then. Mike Hendricks was Tony's closest friend and the SWAT team sniper. The duo had worked together for 7 years. Mike had 2 children, 6-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Jack. Tony was their godfather. March 18th, 2008, Tuesday. A bank robbery on the east side had turned into a hostage situation. Tony's team was called. Standard operation, robber inside with 12 hostages, refusing to exit, rejecting negotiation. Tony formulated the plan. Mike would take sniper position from the roof. The rest of the team would enter in 2 groups, simple, effective, minimal risk. But Tony had overlooked one detail. The robber was a paranoid schizophrenic who wasn't taking medication. Normal logic didn't apply to him. Tony's 7 years of experience couldn't account for this situation. When the operation began, everything went according to plan, until the robber spotted Mike's position on the roof and opened random fire. A bullet hit Mike. Tony could never forget that moment. The last sound from the radio. "Tony, I'm hit. I'm on the roof. Need help." Mike lost his life. Emma and Jack lost their father. Tony lost his perfect record and his self-confidence. After Mike's funeral, Tony took 3 months leave. He was diagnosed with PTSD. Treatment was recommended. But this wasn't something treatment could fix. The problem was that Tony now knew he wasn't perfect. Being a SWAT leader allows for no margin of error. One mistake means a teammate's death. Tony had made that mistake. Maria was pregnant at the time. Sophia was 4 months away. Tony sat down one day talking to her belly. "You know what, little one?" he'd said. "Your daddy used to be perfect, but not anymore. And if you're not perfect, you can't protect people. So daddy's going to find a different job, a job where he can protect you." When Sophia was born, Tony had submitted his resignation. The transition from SWAT to gas station might have seemed strange, but it made sense to Tony. At a gas station, the cost of making a mistake wasn't someone's death. At most, you'd give wrong change. For 15 years, Tony had hidden his SWAT identity. Only Maria knew. Even Sophia thought her father had never been a police officer. She thought Daddy was always a gas station attendant. Tony wanted it that way. The past should stay in the past. But sometimes the past returns, and that night at 3:22 a.m., 15 years later, it came back. The gas station on the interstate highway was deserted after 2 a.m. Tony had worked here for 15 years and knew the rhythm of the night shift. 2 to 3 a.m., truck drivers; 3 to 4 a.m., factory workers; 4 to 5 a.m., early rising office workers. But this night was different. At 1:30 a.m., a blue sedan entered the parking area. 3 young men inside. They didn't buy gas, just sat there. For 10 minutes they observed the station, then left. Normal people wouldn't notice this. But Tony wasn't normal. 15 years hidden, but SWAT training hadn't disappeared. They were conducting reconnaissance. The algorithms from 15 years ago activated in Tony's mind. Suspicious behavior analysis, threat assessment, security protocols. 3 males ages 20 to 25, driver constantly checking mirrors, planning escape route, front passenger talking on phone, coordination, backseat passenger making nervous hand movements, weapon check. This was a classic robbery reconnaissance team. Tony experienced internal conflict. For 15 years, he tried to kill SWAT Tony. That identity brought tragedy. But now he needed that identity. They would return, and Tony would be ready. But he didn't yet know this wasn't just an ordinary robbery. The story of these 3 young men was surprisingly connected to Tony's own past. Tony quietly began fortifying the station. SWAT training was returning, muscle memory was kicking in. First, he checked the security cameras. 6 cameras, 4 outside, 2 inside. All angles covered the doors. Good. Second, he reviewed emergency protocols. Police call button under the register. Silent alarm directly connected to Central Command. Good. Third, he analyzed the area. Station 12 by 8 meters, 2 exits, main door and back storage door. Cover position behind the register. Choke points, narrow corridor between gondola shelves. And finally, Tony analyzed himself. 46 years old, 15 years of desk work, but physical condition still good. Reflexes, unknown. Decision-making under stress, failed 15 years ago, but no choice. At 2:45 a.m., Tony took out his cell phone, wrote a message to Maria. "Darling, there might be a small situation at work. If I come home late in the morning, it means I talk to police. Tell Sophia her daddy loves her very much." He deleted the message, didn't send it, because if something happened tonight, he wanted Sophia to remember her father as a gas station attendant. Not as SWAT leader Tony Rodriguez. But fate had other plans. At 3:15 a.m., the blue sedan returned, this time with lights off, parked silently. 3 men got out of the car. Tony assessed the situation without his heart racing. After 15 years, the old me is coming back, he thought. But he didn't yet know that one of these 3 men's story would shake him to his core. As the 3 men approached the station, Tony began observing them more carefully. He'd learned in SWAT training. Every detail matters. Every gesture gives a clue. There was something familiar about the way the tall young man in the leader position walked. Shoulders straight, measured steps, head constantly scanning the environment. This wasn't civilian walking. Tony looked more closely. The young man had a thin white mark on his right index finger. Trigger finger callus. This was the mark of someone who used weapons regularly. And then Tony saw the young man's profile. His heart stopped. That face was very familiar. But from where? As the young man approached the door, Tony saw more clearly. Black hair, brown eyes, jaw structure. A flash came to Tony's mind. A memory from 15 years ago. At Mike Hendrix's house, dinner time. Mike's wife Sarah calling to the children, "Emma, Jack, come to dinner." Jack, Mike's son, Jack. 4-year-old little Jack was now a 19-year-old young man. And because his father died because of Tony, he was now robbing gas stations. Tony's world shook. This couldn't be coincidence. This wasn't fate. Was it justice? Jack Hendrix. What had happened to him after losing his father, Mike? Tony had never investigated this. It would have been too painful. But now the answer was before his eyes. Mike's son had become a criminal. Tony's mistake had not only destroyed Mike, but Jack's life as well. When Jack entered the station and saw Tony, he paused for a moment. There was recognition in his eyes, but he wasn't sure. "Good evening," said Jack. His voice sounded very much like Mike's. Tony felt a lump in his throat. "Good evening. How can I help you?" Jack approached the register. His friends also entered. The second young man was smaller, nervous. The third waited by the door. "Have you been working here long?" Jack asked. 15 years. Jack's eyes widened. 15 years, since 2008 then. Tony's heart began beating faster. Jack was calculating. "Yes, why do you ask?" Jack didn't answer, continued studying Tony. You look familiar to me." That's when Tony decided he would tell the truth. "Jack," he said, lowering his voice. "Jack Hendrix." Jack froze. His friends also stopped. "You? Who are you?" "I'm Tony Rodriguez. I used to be police. I was your father's, Mike's partner." The atmosphere inside the station completely changed. This was no longer an ordinary robbery. This was a reckoning with the past. Jack's face showed anger, shock, pain, and complex emotions. You're the man who killed my father?" Tony bowed his head. "I made a mistake in the operation. Your father paid the price for it. Have you been here for 15 years? Did you quit police work after my father died?" "Yes." Jack looked at his friends, then turned back to Tony. "So what happens now?" Tony took a deep breath. "I don't know, Jack. That's your decision." Jack stared at Tony for a long time. Then he turned to his friends. "Get out," he told them. "What? Jack, what are you doing?" said his nervous friend. "I said get out. This is just about me now." His friends hesitated, but there was something in Jack's tone that brooked no argument. They left. Jack and Tony were alone. "Do you know what happened after my father died?" Jack said. Tony shook his head. "My mother couldn't take it. She committed suicide 2 years later. Emma and I were left orphans, foster families, then children's homes. Emma started using drugs, died of an overdose at 16 inches. Tony's eyes filled with tears. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I ended up on the streets too. Theft, robbery, drug dealing, because that was the only way to survive. And now you're here." "Yes, and by some twist of fate, 15 years later, I'm facing the man who wrote my family's destruction." Tony decided to be honest. "Jack, I wish I had died instead of you. Mike needed you and Emma. I was so focused on being perfect that I couldn't see the real risks." Jack was silent for a long time. "You know," he finally said, "I've hated you for 15 years too. I used to imagine what I'd do to you. But now that I see you..." "What? You died too, just like us." SWAT Tony Rodriguez died. Only gas station Tony remained. These words deeply affected Tony. Jack was right. That night, not only Mike had died, SWAT leader Tony Rodriguez had died alongside him. "So what do we do now?" Tony asked. Before Jack could answer, a sound came from outside. Police sirens. "Someone called the police," Jack said without panicking. "My friends are waiting outside. They have weapons." It was decision time for Tony. SWAT leader Tony had been silent for 15 years. but he had to return to save Jack. Jack, listen to me. There's a back exit. You can get out through there. Why are you helping me? Because I owe your father, and you and Emma. I can't let your life be destroyed any further. Jack's eyes were filled with tears. But my friends, they made their own choices. You can make yours. Police sirens were approaching. Jack had to think fast. If I leave, what will I do? I'm still the same Jack. Tony handed him a paper. This is my former commander's number. Commander Williams. Tell him about me. He has a second chance program for former juvenile offenders. If you want a clean start. Jack took the paper. Why are you doing this? Because Mike would have done the same. Because you're still that 4-year-old child. And because it's never too late. At that moment, the back door opened. Tony showed Jack the way out. As Jack was leaving, he turned around. Tony, my father always said good things about you. He used to say, as long as Tony's with me, I'm safe. Maybe you're perfect, not by trying to be perfect, but by trying to be human. Jack exited through the back door, disappearing into the night. Police cars surrounded the station. They caught Jack's 2 friends outside. Tony explained the situation to police. 2 robbers were caught trying to escape. The 3rd one got away. No one asked about Jack's identity. Tony didn't tell them either. The next morning when Tony came to work, police tape was still at the scene. His manager, Bill, approached him. Tony, I heard about last night. Were you really a former police officer? Tony nodded. Yes, a long time ago. Why didn't you ever say? Because there are things from the past that should stay in the past. But last night the past came back to you. Yes, and maybe it was time. Working that day, Tony felt different. The burden he'd carried for 15 years had lightened a bit. The responsibility for Mike's death was still his, but now instead of denying that responsibility, he would try to act appropriately to it. When he went home that evening, Sophia greeted him. Dad, everyone at school is talking about how you're a hero. They saw it on TV. Tony hugged his daughter. I'm not a hero, Sophia. I'm just someone trying to do the right thing. So were you really a police officer before? Tony looked at Maria. Maria nodded. There was nothing left to hide. Yes, little one. I used to be a police officer, even a special team police officer. So cool. Why did you quit? Tony paused for a moment. Because sometimes people make mistakes. Big mistakes. And those mistakes hurt other people. I made such a mistake too. But you did something good last night, didn't you? Yes. Maybe that's how life works. You make a mistake, then you find an opportunity to correct that mistake. That night, Tony went down to the basement. He opened the box he hadn't opened for 15 years. Inside were his uniform, badge, and the photo with Mike. He took out the photo and kissed it. Mike, my brother, I found Jack, and I'm going to try to give him a second chance, just like you would have. Then he took out his phone and called Commander Williams. Commander, this is Tony Rodriguez. Yes, former SWAT Tony. There might be a young man who wants to talk to you. His name is Jack Hendricks. That moment at 3:22 a.m. changed everything. Have you ever faced such critical moments? Has your past tested you? Share your bravest moment in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more true heroism and second chance stories like this, because sometimes life tests you and shows who you really are. See you in the next story. Until then, look at people working night shifts at gas stations with a little more respect. And remember, no one can escape their past, but everyone can try to correct their past.